What does a coaching mindset look like in professional observations? How important is mentorship when it comes to the growth of school leaders? Welcome back to another episode of the Teachers on Fire podcast, airing live on YouTube every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific and 11 a.m. Eastern. My name is Tim Cavey, and my mission here is to warm your heart, spark your thinking, and ignite your professional practice. Today's teacher on fire is Lauren Kaufman. Lauren is passionate about empowering teachers to lead and develop lifelong literacy practices in all learners. She serves as a director of literacy K-12 in Long Island and is the author of The Leader Inside: Stories of Mentorship to Inspire the Leader Within. You'll find Lauren's work on her blog, podcast, the Teach Better team, Future Ready Schools, and in various publications, including Edutopia, Education Week, George Couros' Because of a Teacher, and Lainie Rowell's Evolving with Gratitude. You can connect with Lauren on LinkedIn simply by entering her name, on X and Instagram at Lauren M. Kaufman, and at her website, laurenmkaufman.com. All right, well, thank you so much for joining the program this morning. Lauren, are you, my friend, ready to light it up?
I am ready, Tim. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm so excited to be here because I've followed you for quite some time, and you always have a way of bringing out the best in your guests. So I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much for the kind words, Lauren. What an honor. I'm really inspired by your work, and I've seen a little bit from you and George and Sean and others. So I'm excited to speak to you. I want to say in person, but in real time this morning. As we get into things, or just before we get into your mission and work, Lauren, would you share with us a story of adversity, some challenge from your personal or professional journey, and then describe how you overcame it?
Sure. So when thinking about this, I couldn't think of one specific challenge that came to mind, but I thought of one specific feeling that came to mind, which kind of is a feeling that always creates a challenge for me, whether it's in my personal or professional life. And that's that feeling of disappointment. Disappointment, it's really just unmet expectations, right? So throughout the trajectory of my career, throughout the trajectory of my life, it's been a feeling that's hard to overcome because I think that we have certain expectations of people, of events, of things. And no matter what direction we're rowing towards, I feel like we paint this picture in our mind of how things are going to go. So for example, when you have your first teaching job and you enter the classroom, you have these expectations for how that's going to look, right? My first year of teaching is going to look like this. And you paint this beautiful picture in your mind. And then you embark on that journey and things happen. There are disruptors that kind of get in the way, things that you don't expect. People that disappoint you, situations that might disappoint you, interactions with kids that might disappoint you. So that's a feeling for me that's difficult. Even as an adult sitting here right now, we always feel a variety of emotions over the course of our days, our weeks, our months, our years, right? And it's like, how do we navigate that? How did I navigate it when I went from teacher to reading specialist, right? From reading specialist to coach, to an assistant principal, to a district leader. That feeling of disappointment when you have a vision, in your mind about how you want things to go. And they don't necessarily work out that way, or people don't see it the same way as you do. That's something that I've had to navigate through, but also that feeling of disappointment has made me better personally and professionally because it's opened my mind up to looking at things from different perspectives. I think years ago, it used to be like, my way is the way, right? So I had certain level of expectations, and those expectations were very often unmet because there are a lot of people that you work with in an educational organization, right? Yeah. And people come from different backgrounds. They have different mindsets. They have different ways of doing things, and one is not better than the other. It's just who you are and what you believe, what you value. And I think over the course of time, what I've come to understand is how I've overcome that feeling of disappointment and challenges is really get to know who you are, right? Who am I? What do I believe? But who are the people around me? What do they believe in? Really taking time to get to know people, to really understand that I think everybody has really good intentions, whether it be kids, colleagues, right, fellow leaders, community members. I think everybody wants the best for kids, for their educational ecosystems. But sometimes it just takes a little longer to get there, right? So I know that I didn't give you one example of something, but I just think that we encounter this feeling so many times, and I'm probably not alone in saying that that feeling is hard to overcome. It still is sometimes, but I think having this level of understanding for other people, getting to know them, and then understanding how to respond instead of react to situations is really important.
Congratulations, Lauren, on the recent release of The Leader Inside, Stories of Mentorship to Inspire the Leader Within. Let's talk about leadership. Let's talk about mentorship. How important is mentorship when it comes to the growth of school leaders?
Mentorship, I think, is the foundation of everything we do in any role we serve in. We have to set strong foundations so that people can have long, meaningful careers in whatever role they're serving in. And to me, the way I view leadership is that if you are in an educational organization, no matter what role you're serving in, you are a leader for kids, right? We want kids also to view themselves as leaders, right? Because that's why we're here. We're shaping the future leaders of tomorrow, right? So mentorship is something that needs to happen. Not just when you step into a leadership role, but from a very young age. We need to be able to recognize who the mentors are in our path. You know, for me, it was my fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Roth, who I still speak to every week, pretty much. She's actually she contributed a chapter with me in my book. We wrote back and forth, and she retired as an assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction. And then when I was looking to get into a formal leadership role, I asked her if she would be my mentor. I picked up the phone after 30 years. I called her. We had lost touch. And she was like, oh my goodness, Lauren, of course, I'll be your mentor. And then ever since then, we stay connected. And it's really a beautiful story. So if it wasn't for her recognizing these leadership qualities within me as a very young girl, maybe I wouldn't be here today in this role. You know, also my parents, you know, they're in education. They were in education. They're retired now. They were strong mentors for me. And I really got to see the impact of what it means to be an educator, what it means to leave a legacy behind in your classroom with kids and kids' hearts and minds. So, you know, my parents were very much people I looked up to. And they're very much the reason why I am here today. Although I'm the only formal administrator in my family, I have I'm in a sea of educators, including my sister. You know, lots of people in my family. You know, I always look to them for advice. I look to Mrs. Roth for advice. So mentorship is really, really important. So I was lucky to have Mrs. Roth, right? Because she had served in a similar trajectory to me. She had been a classroom teacher, and as she, you know, moved through an educational organization, she became an assistant principal, a director, and then an assistant superintendent. So it's interesting that we've had these similar trajectories, and then our paths crossed again. You know, I wasn't the 10-year-old little girl in her class anymore. I was now Lauren, you know, a woman with a family who already had, you know, 15 years of education under her belt and was looking to go into leadership. So, you know, her mentorship was really important to me because that feeling of disappointment that I talked about earlier happened a lot in the beginning of that process when I was taking the leap into leadership. And, you know, it's not always easy to land your first role. You know, there's a lot that goes into that. And you have to have a lot of perseverance, and you have to believe in who you are and keep going if that's what you really want. But when I stepped into that formal leadership role, I was lucky because I was paired with a great principal. You know, in my building, I was the AP for this principal, and he really took me under his wing. somebody I can go to every day, someone where I felt comfortable telling him what I was doing, what I felt I was doing really well. And he would tell me that, because mentorship is very much this reciprocal relationship. It's not just about the mentor mentoring the mentee. It's about the mentee getting their mentor to even see things they might not even see. So I very much believe in reverse mentorship as well. But if you go into that space, like learning from each other, I think that's where the most impact is made. But he was really my mentor. And then when I took a district leadership role, I've had many mentors in this role. I was actually given a mentor as well, who was really strong in curriculum and instruction. But really there are mentors all around us. I don't feel we need to have a formal mentor to have mentorship. I think every interaction serves as a mentor. Every exchange you have, you can reflect and think about, is this who I want to be? Is this where I'm going? Is this conversation leading me to my ultimate destination? Are these little conversations that add up to the bigger picture getting me there? So I just think that mentorship is extremely important, but I think we have to be open to finding it in all different places.
Well, what I'm hearing there is it doesn't have to be structured to be valuable and to be impactful. I do wonder, I want to go back to the phone call or that exchange, that arrangement that you had with Mrs. Roth. What did you say your last interaction or relationship with her was? Was it 30 years ago in the classroom?
So no, I had actually had spoken to her. We stayed in touch. I think yes, because my parents were actually teachers in the same district she taught in. So we had that connection kind of where I got to, we checked in on each other earlier on, but we really had lost touch for a good 30 years or so. I think we followed each other on social media, but we really didn't interact. And then I think because of social media, though, I felt comfortable to pick up the phone and call her, because I kind of felt like I kind of knew what she was doing. I was following her in her retirement, and but I've had many teachers. I could have picked up the phone and maybe called another teacher, but I always found her to be empathetic. I always found her to be innovative and just a bright light in my life. When I have fond memories of elementary school, I always think of her. She's the teacher that comes to mind.
So great. I don't want to belabor this point, Lauren, but I do want to press you gently, perhaps, on this one piece in terms of the formal structure. And now you've said that it doesn't need to be formal, that it can still be valuable, that there's a mindset at play here where we are seeking to learn from other people in every interaction, and I completely value that. But would you not agree, though, that the average person, even if they feel like they're in that mindset, in that headspace, they're maybe not deriving as much value as that person who is intentionally sitting down or connecting on a weekly or biweekly basis with a mentor?
I would agree with that. I think that not everybody I think when you're having a mindset and looking for mentors all around you and it feels a little more informal, I think you have to be more proactive about it and intentional about it. And perhaps not everybody is that way. And it's not a bad thing. It just is, right? Everybody's different. And some people do need that formal structure. In my prior school district, I facilitated our mentor program, K to 12. So I was responsible for setting up that formal structure that you're talking about. So I do have experience with this. And there are different things that have to happen if you're lucky enough to have a formal mentorship program in your district. And I know in New York State, that is a priority. You must have a formal mentor program. And there are mentoring standards that you must align your program to. And they're very much rooted in developing professional learning communities, so that teaching and learning is at the heart of the conversations. Really, that's why we're here, for kids. Right. So, within that formal structure, I think it's important that whoever is in that case, it was me setting up mentors and mentees. I think that's the first step, is thinking carefully about who would be the right person for this new teacher, for this new administrator, right? Who is going to carve out that space and time for that formal and structured mentorship, right? And within that formal framework, there also has to be space for flexibility and room to meet informally, whether it's texting, whether it's video conferencing, whatever it is. I think there has to be some flexibility in that, because you can set up times to meet and things happen, or you don't want to wait until your meeting in 2 weeks. If you have, a challenge that you're facing right now, that person has to be available. So I think, and what I've learned is that person doesn't necessarily have to be in your discipline. They don't have to be in your building. They just have to be somebody who knows the culture of where you are. I think that's a really important part of mentorship. Knows the culture, knows the climate a little bit, and can really help guide you. So I think that the person just has to have this level of dedication and commitment to that process to see it through. We can't just say, oh, yes, I'm going to mentor someone and then, meet once or twice, and call it a day. It's got to be an ongoing commitment, and communication is at the heart of that. Communication and collaboration and trust, all at the heart of a strong mentorship relationship.
And I want to dig into the practical details of that more in just a moment. First of all, I want to say hello to a couple of people. We've got Andrew Cavey. I know this guy on YouTube. He says, teaching others, definitely one of the most powerful learning tools. You learn it more as you teach it. I think he's speaking there to the reciprocal power of the mentorship relationship that you mentioned a few minutes ago. And we've got Lauren McLean, Teach Outdoors, tuning in on X. She says, I love hearing that mentorship is a requirement. It makes it so much more likely that we will retain new and passionate educators. Absolutely. We want to protect and support our rookies, our newbies in the profession. And she adds, having a mentor who has a positive growth mindset. Absolutely. Not putting that rookie with a grizzly, somebody who, as I mentioned earlier, has maybe given up a little bit or given way to cynicism. Sadly, we do know that we have some colleagues of that nature in the profession. And yeah, we want to put them with someone who maybe has survived some storms, but still has that vision, still has that positivity, and is looking to grow and learn. Absolutely. So as I mentioned, I wanted to get into the practical details, and maybe I jumped the gun a little bit on myself here, Lauren. So you started to get into this, but take me through a mentorship arrangement. I'd like to engage in a mentorship situation somewhere in my school or district, let's say. What would you recommend in practical terms? Something that's sustainable, efficient. I like how you said it can be flexible. I can pick up the phone even when it's not a formal meeting time, perhaps. But do you like the idea of meeting in mornings, afternoons? Does it really just depend on the people involved?
Yes, it depends on the people involved. It's like, when do you like to get your workout in? Are you a morning person or an after work person? And I think that's part of being intentional about setting up a mentor and mentee, having them together. If you don't have a schedule that aligns, that can become a problem. I mean, with technology today and all that, I mean, it's much more flexible than what it used to be. It's so much easier to connect with someone. But if you want to meet in person, which I still love the idea of connecting with people in person. There's just a different feel to it when you get to have that experience, I think. But yeah, that schedule should align, whatever works for that relationship and will help you thrive. I think that it's important to commit and put those dates on the calendar. So, I know in New York State, it used to be that 40 hours when I was facilitating the mentor program was the magic number for the year. I don't know that it's the same anymore. It might be a little bit more, might be a little bit less. I'm not really sure, but putting those meeting dates in the calendar is super important, because then you're like, okay, you're committing to that time together, and And also, I used to tell the mentors and mentees during that time, take in everything that's happening around you, write it down, have a list of things that you would like to formally discuss with your mentor. And if there are things that can't wait, try to come up with a communication system that works for you. I don't know if it's a text message. Maybe it's a running Google Doc that you have together that you can just exchange information. Maybe it is just through video conferencing. Let's hop on a quick Zoom call. You're having an issue. Let's talk it out. So I think that's where that flexibility comes in place. So having those dates there and then having a system for yourself where you're logging what's happening, why is it happening, and some things that you can ask your mentor. I mean, there are different things too within that structure that you want to focus on. I know that there are learning standards for leaders, just as there are for teachers, right? And within that, what do you want to talk about? As a new leader, there's the operations and management standard. There's the curriculum and instruction and standard. There's building a professional community for teachers. There's making sure community is involved, right? So there's all these different components, and I would use those standards, not only the mentoring standards, but also the standards for leadership. I know that we have them here in New York State. Use them as guides, as like a blueprint to go about your work. For me, when I became a formal leader, my strength was really around curriculum instruction and assessment. That was my background. Building professional learning communities, that was my background. But my learning curve was operations and management, which is number one really when it comes to like school safety and making sure kids are safe, right? Learning those procedures and protocols. That was another learning curve for me. Within the building, within your organization, what does that look like? And then things are a little different, building to building. So you want to get to know those things too. So find what your strengths are. You can when you use those standards as a blueprint, you can go through them together and say, what do you feel your strengths are? And then the mentor might learn from the mentee, oh, wow, you're really strong with curriculum and instruction. Tell me about that, because we should always leverage our mentee's strengths, right? They should feel like they're adding value to the relationship. And we talked about reciprocal relationships before. So to me, having those dates on the calendar, using your leadership standards as a guide for a conversation is really, really helpful. And then coming up with some, if-then times, like if this happens and, I'm not meeting you for 2 weeks, what can we do? What works for you? Because I know you have a family, I have a family. I don't want to be this burden, right? Or a person who's like overwhelming to you. This should be an experience where we both feel comfortable to connect.
I want to get into a related topic, which is coaching. I know in my teaching career, I've had many observations, but few coaching experiences where an instructional coach is coming into my room on a regular basis. And I found it so valuable just to have those innocent, gentle questions about my practice, just that person beside me to ask those reflective questions. And I think that's maybe where you're going with this. So tell us about what a coaching mindset is and what does that make, or how does a coaching mindset make a powerful approach to school leadership?
Well, a lot of my career, I served as an instructional coach. So I very much lead with a coaching mindset. And I say in the book, The Leader Inside, I lead with this question, that I ask myself, Lauren, what type of leader do you want to be? And I answered, the leader I always needed. I've gotten observed formally, probably close to 40 times in my career, informally more than I can count. And when I really thought about those observations that made a significant impact on my teaching and learning practices, I really thought that there were so few. There should have been a lot more. Some of the experiences that I had, they weren't terrible. They felt a little bit more like check the box experiences. An administrator will walk into the room, they have to do this observation, they sit behind the device, they're typing away, and the teacher has some anxiety because you're thinking, what are they typing? And they're not really interacting with me or with the kids. And, and that's just the way they do things. I'm not knocking that. It's just part of how some people, operate in that role and get things done. But for me, I never found it helpful. I always found it a little more anxiety provoking when it was done that way. So when I stepped into a formal leadership role, I thought, how can I shift the narrative of an observation? Let's start there, because in my role now, it's so big, K to 12, that, I'm not in a building the way when I was an AP and I had more focus time with teachers. I'm a little bit of everywhere, right? So I'm seeing teachers all across the district. And how can I be really intentional with my time? The teachers are really starting to get used to me, because in the beginning, when I was leading with a coaching mindset, they were like, whoa, what is this? Because to me, a coach is a thought partner. It's somebody who sees the gifts in you that you might not recognize in yourself. So when I come into every observation conversation, I think the pre-observation, that coaching conversation, is super important, because you get to know who the teachers are as teachers, what they value in their classrooms, what it is they're teaching, what led up to this moment. You want to see if they know their kids in the classroom, and just share some ideas before you actually jump into their room. I kind of feel like it's awkward just to jump into someone's room sometimes, unless you're doing like an informal walkthrough, and it's very quick. And that I could talk about later, because I love the 30-second feedback idea if you're doing informal walkthroughs around coaching. But for the formal piece of it, it's like, having some questions where you come in as a thought partner, like, hey, I'm going to approach this as a thought partner. What are you thinking about doing? Why are you doing it? What are the priority standards you're hitting? The feeling of being less evaluative and more collaborative. That's the feel that I'm looking for, because I want to bring out the best in that person so that they can bring out the best in their kids, right? And then when I'm in the classroom, it's kind of interesting, because I'll start behind the computer. I don't jump in right away, but when I see there's an opportunity, and I get up very often during an observation, especially if there's a lot of group work happening, I'm sitting with the kids, I'm listening to them. And I'll even stand side by side with the teacher, and I will coach them right in the moment. It happened yesterday. I'll say, what are you thinking right now? What are you thinking about what the students are doing? And that starts a whole conversation. And, I saw something yesterday around, the kids were all around different charts around the room, and they were analyzing a story through different literary devices. So I was asking the teacher, and they were standing in these like semicircles around the charts. And I said, oh, have you ever heard of this strategy called building thinking classrooms? It's actually a mathematical strategy. I said, but it's very much aligned with what's happening right now, because there are these vertical charts, on the walls. The kids are just having these really fluid conversations, really deep conversations, adding on to each other's thinking. It felt less formal, less intimidating. She goes, oh no, I've never heard of that. I'm gonna look into it. I said, yeah. And I said, and the fact that they're moving in and out and circulating around the room, that movement, I said, let's talk about neuroscience for a second. And then I say to her, have you ever heard of this book, Learning How to Learn by Barbara Oakley? It's all about how kids learn. It's neuroscience just broken down in a much easier fashion. I said, in the beginning of your class, everyone was in focus mode. They were consuming information. And I said, and now they're in diffuse mode. They're getting to connect the dots because they're moving around. And as you move around, you're making those connections, right? Your neurons, everything's working and making connections. And she's like, look at me. And she's like, that's so cool. I never thought of that. And I said, okay, go back to what you're doing, but like in the moment, like, I was having that thought in the moment. Why we shouldn't wait to share it with the teacher. If there's a moment I didn't want to disrupt her lesson, but it was a moment where I could do it. So that's what I'm talking about. It's coaching doesn't have to be this like, oh, I am the expert. I'm walking into your room as the expert. It's not that. It's we are learning together. And I'm going to ask you a question that's going to get you to be reflective in that moment. Because waiting for a week later, even months later, I used to wait for months sometimes to get a post observation, you know? And then I was like, okay, this doesn't really mean anything to me right now because I have moved on since then. So that's the type of stuff I think about as a leader, leading with the coaching mindset.
So rich. I love those anecdotes, Lauren. And I was waiting for a BTC to come out in that little anecdote that you shared from your classroom visit yesterday. So yes, building thinking classrooms. I know that wasn't really the point of what you shared, but just coming in as a coach and asking questions, it took me a while to sort of get the power of that when you have someone beside you, and I think I mentioned it earlier, simply asking questions. They don't need to be preaching at you or lecturing you about your practice, but simply, I think I'll back up. I think most teachers, most colleagues that we work with are professionals. They want to teach well. They're interested in learning and growing. And so in most cases, now I'm sort of speaking for you and you might correct me on this, but I think in a lot of cases, all we need to do is simply ask those questions that get them reflecting on their practice. And they arrive sort of at the conclusion or the next step in their professional growth on their own in a lot of cases. Thank you for joining us, Teachers on Fire. If you're getting value from this conversation, give this video a like. Lauren, I do want to double back on something that you teased a moment ago, and that was the 30-second feedback following the classroom walkthrough. So this is right in my world, my friend. You are helping my practice right now. So give me a sense of what that looks like. What is the 30-second feedback?
Sure. Well, that's something I learned from my friend Meghan Lawson in her book, Legacy of Learning. You got to love Meghan. Meghan is also a contributor in my book. And really, this idea comes from Mike Rutherford in his work in The Artisan Teacher. And it really is all about you walk into a space and you're looking at things through an asset-based lens. Like, what is happening that's awesome right now, right? So there might be a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but you're really looking for the positive, right? So the first thing you would do is you would think about what is happening right now in this space. And you would think about that practice, right? And then you would think about how does that benefit the students? Those are the two things. Then when you leave the room, you're not necessarily having that interaction with the teacher right then, but I walk around with Post-its sometimes, which is great for 30-second feedback. And you would start with a greeting. The greeting would say, hey, Mrs. Smith, thank you so much for having me in your classroom. Then you go with your noticing. I noticed that you were performing an interactive read aloud, right? So that's your noticing. Then you pair that with this skill. How is this going to lift the level for the students? That's really going to support your students with building vocabulary and language comprehension skills. That's going to benefit them. And then the end is just, thank you so much. I look forward to being back again in your classroom. So it's very simple.
Yeah, very simple, very formulaic, but powerful. And I love the asset-based instead of the deficit-based. And I think a lot of teachers, at least traditionally, feel like the deficit lens is what the administrator is coming in with. So you're looking for that asset. What are they doing well? How are they rocking it? And how is that benefiting student learning? And then building off of that and sparking those additional conversations. Lauren, as schools and districts continue to wrestle with professional learning models, tell us why you're a believer in job-embedded learning, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in districts who invest in instructional coaching, in job-embedded learning, because those people who we're investing in, they know the mission and vision of the district. They know what the building level goals are. They know the people. That's the business we're in. We're in a people business, They really invest their time in getting to know who they're serving and what the needs are. And when you're trying to accomplish your priorities in your school district, it's difficult sometimes to have people coming and going. It's like you have people coming in, okay, and now they're not coming back for another 4 weeks or 6 weeks, but there's so much that happens in the process. It's not just about the product, it's about the process of learning. And that's when we have the most questions, is in the process. And we need to have people to turn to help us through our thinking. As we're learning, as we're failing, and as we're iterating, and as we're trying again, that's when that thought partner comes into play. Now, there's something good about having outside perspectives too, every now and again. It's great to have a consultant come in here and there to kind of like look at things objectively, because sometimes with job embedded, you kind of are, you're so in it that sometimes it's hard to see things. So that's when it's great to get that outside perspective, because I do believe in that as well. But I think if you want to see any long-term effects of teaching and learning, any long-term goals that you have, small moves make big impact. It's within the small moves that add up to the big things. And you need people on the front lines with you, recognizing that and celebrating those small wins with you. Because when you think about the big picture or the big goal, that can get overwhelming, right? But if you have someone kind of guiding you along the way, serving as a lantern and a guide through that, that's much more palatable, I feel.
So good. Love that metaphor as well. If you're enjoying this conversation, Teachers on Fire, consider adding the Teachers on Fire YouTube channel to your morning commute. Start your day and your week on fire. Lauren, we're going to start to wind down with a few biographical questions, a few questions that will just help us get to know you a little bit better. So let's start with this one. Share about a personal habit or a productivity hack that contributes to your success and keeps your fire burning. Is there a go-to routine that you've got going on the daily or the regular that helps keep you productive?
Yes. So I read a lot. I actually slow read a lot, which means that, or I slow listen to podcasts, which means that I'm reading multiple books at once. So I might be reading a chapter of this book, a chapter of another book. I might listen to some of this podcast, some of another podcast. But what I do is, here's my trick. In my phone, in my notes section, in my iPhone, I title each book and the author, and I jot down little notes from the podcast, from the book, from the article, whatever it is I'm reading. And, I might not always have that book with me or that podcast to listen to, but I always have my phone with me. So if I'm on the line at the supermarket, or if I'm waiting in the car for my kids from their practice, and I just want to kind of look through and see, what did I learn this week? That helps me because I love to write. That wouldn't work for everybody. That might feel stressful to some people, but for me, it works because I write every week. And I always think about, what am I going to write about? What did I learn this week? What happened in my world? How can I make it practical? And how can I make this palatable for others?
I have to follow that up. Do you read only physical books, or do you read on Kindles and e-readers as well?
I don't read on e-readers. I'll read on my phone if an article. I read articles on my phone, but I'm a big fan of Audible. So I listen to a lot of books, and then I also like the physical copy as well, because I also I'm a highlighter and a Post-it person.
Love it. Point us to an edtech tool or app, Lauren, that you currently love using somewhere in your professional practice.
Canva. Oh my goodness. I am obsessed with Canva. I mean, all of my presentations are Canva. Any tools that I create, any one-pagers, great for like a multimedia experience. You're embedding video into Canva or doing a voiceover. Super cool. But I have to say, I was playing around with Notebook LM last weekend. I don't know if you've played around with that one. But I actually took one of my blogs and it turns it into a podcast. So two AI voices are actually talking about your writing. Right.
Oh my goodness.
So you could put anything in there, even if your agenda from like your faculty meeting, or if you're recording a meeting, put it in there and it'll turn it into a podcast. Pretty cool.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Recommend a book, Lauren. Now you said you're a reader, and I know you're sort of jumping from title to title. Is there one that you've been reading lately, or perhaps one of your all-time faves that's been deeply influential that you could share?
So many, but I'll choose one just now, just because I just finished reading it, is Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara. And it's not necessarily an education book, but I love reading things outside of education because they help you see education a little bit differently and what can I bring from that. But he basically brought 11 Madison Park, one of the top restaurants in New York City, to be the #1 restaurant in the world. And he talks about how he did that and all the trials and tribulations just to get there. So it's very interesting how being hospitable actually led him to that place. But I think we need to do that in education as well. Be hospitable.
Absolutely. Isn't that a value that we all want in our schools? And then tell us about someone that we need to follow on Education X, Instagram, LinkedIn, or elsewhere, someone who's been inspiring you lately.
You know, Darrin didn't just pick one, so, you know, I can't pick one. Darrin's awesome. Darrin Peppard. He's one of them. But Sean Gaillard, he's been such a supporter of mine and friend and thought partner. If you don't follow him, you need to, because he's just such an amazing leader in person. So supportive of people and really lifts me up, especially when I need it. I got to say something about Meghan Lawson. I know I mentioned her before. She's another supporter. And then Adam Welcome. He's been a great thinking partner for me as I journeyed through, you know, being an author and navigating the educational space in a little bit of a different way. So
those are fantastic names. I need to reconnect with Adam. That man electrifies me every time I hear him speak. What are the best ways for the Teachers on Fire to follow you, Lauren?
Sure. Well, you can connect with me on X at Lauren M. Kaufman. Or, you know, my website is another great way, laurenmkaufman.com. You can contact me through there, but you can also see the work that I'm doing, the writing, any speaking, things like that. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lauren. This conversation has been fun and informative. I've learned a lot, and I might be getting back in touch with you, certainly going through the Leader Inside. So thank you so much for sharing some of your precious weekend time with the podcast today.
You bet.
Teachers on Fire, I'm your host, Tim Cavey, and I'm so grateful that you too decided to spend some of your day listening to this podcast or watching this video. I hope that in some way the content you heard today from Lauren Kaufman sparked your thinking and ignited your practice. And I'll meet you next week right here on the Teachers on Fire podcast. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
No hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, 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 go. Hustle hard, hustle every single day.